My name is Chloe, and I'm 26 years old. On the evening of my birthday, after working a 16-hour double shift, my father sent me a text message that read, "We sold your car to pay for your brother's trip. Be grateful we got a good price." They thought they were breaking me. They had no idea they were finally setting me free. The fluorescent lights of the hospital break room flickered, humming a tired, monotonous tune that matched the buzzing in my own head. Every part of me ached. My feet were swollen in my sneakers, my back was a tight knot of stress from leaning over patients all day, and my eyes burned from staring at charts and monitors. It was 11:05 p.m. on my 26th birthday. While most people were out celebrating with friends or having a quiet dinner with family, I was peeling off my scrubs, the fabric smelling of antiseptic and exhaustion. I hadn't wanted to work a double shift on my birthday, but I needed the money. Every extra hour, every grueling shift, was a deposit into my escape fund. A fund my family knew nothing about. It was my secret hope, the down payment on a tiny studio apartment across town, a place where no one could take things from me or make me feel small. I slumped onto a hard plastic chair, my body feeling heavier than lead. My stomach rumbled. I'd missed lunch and dinner, surviving on a stale protein bar and lukewarm coffee. I pulled my phone out of my locker, a small flicker of hope in my chest. Maybe there would be a nice message. Maybe my mom had called. Maybe my dad had sent one of his rare, short but sweet HBD texts. There was one new message. It was from my dad. A smile touched my lips for the first time all day. I tapped it open, expecting to see a birthday wish. Instead, the words on the screen swam before my eyes, and the air left my lungs in a silent, painful rush. "We sold your car to pay for your brother's trip. Be grateful we got a good price." I read it once, then a second time, a third. The words didn't change. They just sat there, cold and brutal and absolute. My car, my 2012 Honda Civic. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I'd worked 2 part-time jobs all through nursing school to buy it. It was the first major thing I had ever owned, a symbol of the independence I craved so desperately. It was my transportation to this grueling job. It was my freedom, and they had sold it. Not for an emergency, not for a medical bill, but for my brother's trip. My 28-year-old brother, Brandon, who had decided, on a whim, that he needed to find himself on a 6-week backpacking tour of Southeast Asia. A trip he couldn't afford because he refused to hold a job for more than a few months. The worst part, the part that felt like a physical slap, was the last sentence. "Be grateful we got a good price." Grateful. They wanted me to be grateful that they had ripped away a piece of my life, my hard work, my mobility, and handed it over to my golden child brother. Grateful that they had gotten a good deal on my sacrifice. The phone felt slick in my hand. I could feel a tremor starting in my fingers, a cold rage that was so pure and so intense it burned away the exhaustion. There was no sadness. Not yet. The sadness would come later. Right now, there was only a terrifying clarity. This wasn't just a car. This was a message. They were telling me that I didn't matter. My needs, my work, my property, my life, it was all just a resource to be tapped for the benefit of my brother. I was the family workhorse, the reliable, responsible daughter whose only purpose was to facilitate the whims of everyone else. Have you ever been made to feel like your sacrifices are not only ignored, but expected? Like you're just a utility for someone else's life, especially by the very people who should be building you up? Share your story in the comments below. Reading them reminds me that this fight for respect is one many of us face. And if you're new here, make sure you subscribe, because you're going to want to see what I did next. My father's text wasn't an ending. It was a declaration of war. And I was about to show them what happens when the family ATM finally decides to close its account for good. They thought they were teaching me a lesson in humility. What I was about to teach them was a masterclass in consequences. That text message wasn't a spark. It was a detonation. And as I sat there under the buzzing hospital lights, the shrapnel of a lifetime of slights and sacrifices flew through my mind. This wasn't about a car. It had never been just about the car. It was about the entire system my family had built, a system designed with one purpose: to funnel resources, energy, and hope from me to my brother, Brandon. It started when we were kids. I remember when I was 9, I won the school science fair. I'd worked for weeks on a model of the solar system, painstakingly painting each planet, getting the orbits just right. I came home with a blue ribbon and a certificate, my chest puffed out with pride. My dad glanced at it and said, "That's nice, honey." Then he turned to Brandon, who was 2 years older, and spent the next hour helping him build a ridiculously oversized ramp for his skateboard in the backyard. My mom told me to put the ribbon in my scrapbook and then asked me to help her shell peas for dinner. Later that week, Brandon broke his arm trying a trick on the ramp. The universe for the next 2 months revolved around him. His cast, his pain, his needs. My blue ribbon was forgotten. I was just the quiet, helpful daughter who shelled the peas. That became the pattern. I was the responsible one. Brandon was the one with potential. My successes were quiet, expected, and ultimately utilitarian. His failures were loud, dramatic, and required the full, undivided attention and resources of the entire family. When I was 16, I got my first job at a local diner to start saving for a car. My paychecks, which I proudly deposited into my own bank account, were soon referred to as the Family Emergency Fund. The first emergency was when Brandon needed a new laptop because he'd spilled a soda on his old one. "You don't mind, do you, Chloe?" my mom had said, not as a question, but as a statement. "He needs it for school. You're so good with your money, you can save up again." I minded. I minded so much it felt like a stone in my stomach, but I didn't know how to say no. Saying no meant I was selfish. It meant I wasn't a team player. When it came time for college, I knew I was on my own. My parents made it clear that any savings they had were for Brandon. "He's going to a 4-year university, Chloe. It's a bigger investment," my dad explained, as if I were a stock portfolio. "Community college is a smart, practical choice for you." So I went to community college for 2 years while working nearly full-time, then clawed my way into a competitive nursing program. I took out loans. I worked weekends and holidays. I ate ramen noodles and wore secondhand clothes. I graduated with honors, a certified registered nurse, ready to start a demanding but rewarding career. At my graduation party, which was a small potluck in our backyard, my dad gave a toast. He said, "We're all so proud of Chloe. She's always been so practical. Now she can finally help the family out for real." He wasn't proud of my achievement. He was proud of my new income potential. My career wasn't my own. It was a new asset for the family ledger, and they did not hesitate to use it. In the 4 years since I started working as a nurse, I have loaned them money for a new roof, which was fair enough, I lived there. But I also paid for Brandon's business ventures. There was the artisanal dog biscuit company that ended after he burned the first batch and decided it was too much work. There was the drop-shipping t-shirt business where he bought $1,000 worth of inventory that is still sitting in boxes in their garage. Each time, my mom would approach me with a sad, worried look on her face. "Brandon is so passionate about this one, Chloe. He just needs a little seed money. You know how he is. He feels things so deeply. His confidence is fragile. We have to support him." Supporting Brandon meant I couldn't move out. Every time I mentioned getting my own place, they'd hit me with a tidal wave of guilt. "But who will help with the mortgage? Don't you love us? The family needs to stick together." What they meant was, they needed me to stick around so I could keep paying for things. The car was my one rebellion. I bought it with money I'd painstakingly hidden from them, squirreled away from overtime shifts they didn't know I was taking. It was my one piece of tangible freedom. My escape vehicle, both literally and figuratively. I kept the title in my name, locked in a safe deposit box at the bank. I thought that would be enough to protect it. I was so naive. I remember the conversation about Brandon's trip to Asia. It was a few weeks ago at Sunday dinner. He was talking about feeling stifled and needing to experience the world to figure out his path. My dad, who had always lectured me about fiscal responsibility, was nodding along, a proud look on his face. "A man needs to see the world to know his place in it," he'd said, puffing out his chest. I'd almost choked on my water. I had asked for a weekend trip to the beach with a friend a month prior and was told it was an irresponsible expense. When Brandon announced the trip would cost at least $5,000, a sum he absolutely did not have, all eyes turned to me. I just shook my head. "I can't," I said, my voice quiet but firm. I'm saving. My dad's face hardened. Saving for what? You have everything you need right here. My mom put her hand on my arm. Don't be difficult, Chloe. Your brother needs this. It could be the thing that finally sets him on the right path. I stood my ground for the first time in my life. I said no. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I had finally drawn a line. Instead, they just went behind my back and crossed it for me, taking the one thing that was unequivocally mine. They didn't just sell my car. They sold my trust, my history of sacrifice, and any lingering foolish hope I had that they might one day see me as a person, not a resource. For a few long minutes, I just sat there in the break room, the phone still in my hand. The rage was a physical thing, a humming wire pulled taut inside my chest. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Something inside me had shifted, locking into place with a cold, hard click. The part of me that always made excuses for them, the part that hoped for their approval, died right there on that sticky plastic chair. I took a deep, shuddering breath. The old Chloe would have called them, crying, begging for an explanation she already knew. The old Chloe would have absorbed the injustice and somehow blamed herself. The new Chloe opened the phone's keypad and typed a single, simple question to her father. How did you sell my car without the title? I knew the answer, of course. I just wanted to see what lie he would tell, how they would justify it. While I waited, a strange calm washed over me. It was the calm of a general on the battlefield after the first shot has been fired. The uncertainty was over. Now, there was only strategy. My phone buzzed. It was my dad. His reply was even more infuriating than his first message. Don't be dramatic. We found it in your old jewelry box. You shouldn't leave important things lying around. My blood ran cold. The jewelry box. It was a cheap pink musical box from my childhood that I kept on my dresser for sentimental reasons. It held costume jewelry and old birthday cards. But years ago, when I first got my license, my dad had insisted I keep a spare car key in there for emergencies. I never kept the title in the house, ever. I knew better. My safe deposit box at the bank held the original bona fide title, issued by the state, with my name, Chloe Ann Miller, printed in clear block letters. What he must have found was the initial bill of sale from the used car dealership where I bought it. It looked official enough, I supposed, if you didn't look too closely. But it wasn't the legal title. And then there was the signature. To transfer ownership, they would have needed my signature. A sickening realization dawned on me. My father, a man who prided himself on his integrity and his firm handshake, had forged my signature. He and my mother had conspired to fraudulently sell my property. It wasn't just unfair anymore. It wasn't just a family squabble. It was a crime. And that knowledge was the catalyst. It was the key that unlocked a door in my mind I never knew existed. A door that led out of the prison of familial obligation and into the open air of self-preservation. This wasn't just an insult. It was evidence. I stood up, my exhaustion replaced by a surge of adrenaline. I walked out of the break room and down the quiet, sterile hallway of the hospital's administrative wing. I knew one of the night supervisors, a woman named Carol, who had always been kind to me. Her husband was a lawyer. Not a flashy corporate lawyer, but a small-town guy who handled contracts, wills, and property disputes. The kind of lawyer who knew the nuts and bolts of the law, the kind of things that trip up arrogant people who think they're smarter than everyone else. I found Carol at her desk, organizing patient files. I explained the situation in a low, steady voice, showing her the texts. I saw the pity in her eyes, but it was quickly replaced by a steely indignation on my behalf. She listened, she nodded, and then she picked up her phone and called her husband, Mark, at home. "Mark, sorry to call so late," she said, her voice all business. "I have a young nurse here with a serious problem. It involves a vehicle title and a potential fraudulent sale. Yes, by her own family." She listened for a moment. "Okay, I'll tell her." She hung up and looked at me. He said, "Don't talk to them. Don't reply to any more texts. Don't answer their calls. Let them wonder. He'll meet you for coffee before his office opens tomorrow morning, 7:30 a.m., at the diner down the street. No charge for the initial consultation. He said to bring everything you have, the texts, any bank statements showing you made the car payments. Your copy of the original bill of sale if you have it, and most importantly, the key to your safe deposit box. That was the moment, the turning point. Standing in that quiet hallway, with the hum of the hospital around me, I made a decision. I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. I wasn't going to absorb this injustice. I was going to fight back, not with tears or yelling, but with facts, with evidence, and with the law. My family had fatally underestimated me. They saw me as the dutiful, quiet, emotional daughter. They never, ever saw me as the methodical, detail-oriented, and resilient nurse who documented every detail on a patient's chart because a single mistake could have dire consequences. They had no idea I applied that same precision to my own life. They had just created the biggest medical emergency of their lives, and they didn't realize that I was the one holding the chart, documenting every single symptom of their toxicity. The game had changed. They had started it, but I was going to finish it. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in silent warfare. On the outside, I was a ghost. I got a ride home from the hospital with a coworker that night, packed a bag with my uniforms, my laptop, and every important document I owned, and left a vague note on the kitchen counter that said, "Staying with a friend for a few days. Need some space." I didn't go home. I crashed on the couch of my friend Sarah, another nurse who knew enough about my family situation to ask no questions and just hand me a key. My phone, as Mark the lawyer had predicted, began to explode. First came the confused texts from my mom. "Chloe, where are you? We're worried." Then came the angry ones from my dad. "This is childish, Chloe. Call us now." Then the guilt trips. "Your brother is so excited for his trip, and you're spoiling it with this behavior." I followed Mark's instructions to the letter. I didn't reply to a single one. I let them spin in their own self-created chaos. Their power over me had always been my response, my engagement. In silence, they had nothing to push against. The morning after the text, I met Mark at the diner. He was a kind-faced man in his 50s with tired eyes that lit up when he talked about the law. I laid everything out on the table. Screenshots of the texts, my bank statements showing the auto loan payments coming directly from my account for 3 years, and the key to my safe deposit box. He looked it all over, nodding slowly. "Forgery, fraudulent misrepresentation, and conversion of property," he said, taking a sip of his coffee. "They're in a world of trouble, Chloe. The question is, how far do you want to take this?" I looked him straight in the eye. "All the way," I said, my voice not shaking at all. "I don't just want my car back or the money. I want them to understand that this is not okay. I want this to stop, permanently." Mark smiled. A real, genuine smile. "Good," he said. That's the answer I was hoping for. The plan he laid out was methodical and brilliant. Step 1 was gathering undeniable proof. That morning I went to the bank, opened my safe deposit box, and there it was. The official certificate of title for my Honda Civic, crisp and clean, with my name as the sole owner. I made a high-quality, notarized copy. Step 2 was a visit to the DMV. Mark explained that when my dad sold the car, he and the buyer would have had to file a transfer of title. We filed a formal inquiry stating that I, the legal owner, had not authorized any sale. This immediately flagged the vehicle's VIN in the state system. Step 3 was the most difficult. Mark had me file a police report. Walking into the local precinct and telling a uniformed officer that my own father had stolen and sold my car was one of the hardest things I've ever done. It felt like a betrayal, even though I was the one who had been betrayed. But I did it. I gave them a clear, concise statement, provided copies of my title and the text messages, and walked out with a case number. This wasn't a family drama anymore. It was a criminal investigation. While the official wheels of justice were slowly beginning to turn, I was making my own moves. I called my HR department at the hospital and changed my direct deposit to a new bank account at a completely different bank, one my family had no connection to. I then went to my old bank and withdrew every penny of my escape fund, which was now my war chest. I found a small, furnished studio apartment for rent online, the kind that caters to traveling nurses and residents, available for immediate move-in. I signed a 6-month lease that very afternoon, using my savings to pay the deposit and first month's rent. For the first time in my life, I had a space that was truly mine, a door I could lock that my parents didn't have a key to. Meanwhile, the silence from my end was driving my family insane. The texts turned from angry to pleading. My mom left long, rambling voicemails, her voice thick with fake tears, talking about how family should stick together and how I was breaking her heart. My dad tried a different tactic, leaving stern, patriarchal messages about disrespect and my duty as a daughter. Brandon, the catalyst for all of this, even sent a clueless text. "Hey, Mom and Dad are freaking out. Whatever it is, can you fix it before my trip? Don't want any bad vibes, LOL." I saved every single message as evidence of their mindset. They weren't sorry for what they did. They were just angry that I wasn't quietly accepting it. The final piece of preparation was the most satisfying. Mark found out who my dad sold the car to, a young college kid who bought it for a suspiciously low price in cash. Mark sent the kid's parents a polite but firm letter explaining that their son was in possession of stolen property acquired through a fraudulent transaction and that the vehicle was now part of an active police investigation. He advised them that their best course of action was to contact the police, return the vehicle, and pursue my father for the money they'd paid him. As Mark predicted, they panicked. The last thing they wanted was their son mixed up in a criminal case. My father had no idea that a storm was gathering. He thought he was dealing with his emotional pushover daughter. He had no clue he was actually up against a registered nurse with a lawyer, a police report, a new apartment, and a spine made of pure, unadulterated steel. The stage was set. Brandon's farewell party was in 3 days. My parents were planning a big family dinner to celebrate his grand adventure, an adventure funded by my stolen property. They sent me an invitation via email, a saccharine, passive-aggressive message about letting bygones be bygones and coming together as a family. It was the perfect venue for the confrontation. They wanted a family gathering. I was going to give them one they would never forget. I walked into my parents' house for the first time in 2 weeks, feeling like a stranger in a familiar land. The air was thick with the smell of my mom's roast chicken and the cloying scent of cheap air freshener. Extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, were all there, milling around the living room, drinks in hand. They greeted me with a mixture of forced smiles and awkward hugs. I was the prodigal daughter returning to the fold, and they were all ready to witness my repentance. They had no idea I was actually the executioner, arriving for a sentence I was about to deliver. My mom rushed over, her face a mask of relieved concern. "Chloe, thank God. We were so worried. Your father and I were just sick." She tried to pull me into a hug, but I stood stiffly, a manila folder clutched in my hand. My dad approached next, his expression stern but with a hint of satisfaction. He thought my return meant he'd won. "It's about time you came to your senses," he said, his voice low so the others couldn't hear. "We can talk about your little disappearing act after dinner. For now, let's just enjoy the evening for your brother's sake." Brandon, oblivious as ever, came over with a beer in his hand and a goofy grin on his face. "Hey sis, glad you're not mad anymore. This trip is going to be epic. You should see the new pack I got. Top of the line." He gestured with his beer, sloshing a little on the floor, the money from my car, funding his epic trip. The rage, which I had kept on a tight leash, flared hot and bright. I ignored them all and walked to the head of the dining room table, where my father usually sat. I placed the folder down with a soft thud that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Everyone turned to look at me. The performance was about to begin. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice clear and steady, projecting like I did when I had to give a difficult diagnosis to a large family. "I know this is supposed to be a farewell party for Brandon, but I have a few announcements to make first. You could call it a family business meeting." My dad's face darkened. "Chloe, this is not the time or the place." "Oh, I think it's the perfect time and place," I replied, my eyes locking with his. "Since this entire celebration is funded by a recent and rather significant financial transaction. A transaction involving my car." A nervous murmur went through the room. Brandon looked confused. My mother's face went pale. "I'd like to start with a little show and tell," I said, opening the folder. I pulled out the first document. "This is a notarized copy of the official certificate of title for my 2012 Honda Civic. As you can all see, the sole registered owner is me, Chloe Ann Miller. It's funny because I keep it in a safe deposit box at the bank, so I was very confused when I learned the car had been sold. I let that hang in the air for a moment. My father took a step forward. Now listen here. This is a private family matter. It stopped being a private family matter the moment you committed a felony, Dad. I shot back, my voice like ice. I pulled out the second document. This is a copy of the police report I filed 2 weeks ago, report number 74-5198. It details the theft and fraudulent sale of my vehicle. The officer I spoke to, a Detective Murphy, was very interested, especially in the part about the forged signature on the transfer documents. My mother gasped and put a hand to her mouth. My Aunt Shirley, who was nosy but had a strong sense of right and wrong, stared at my father with wide eyes. "You wouldn't," my dad whispered, his face turning a blotchy red. "I did," I said, my voice rising with righteous power. "You thought I would just cry and take it, like I always have. You thought I would just work another double shift and pay for whatever Brandon wants next. You were wrong." I turned to my brother. "Brandon, your trip to find yourself in Asia? It was paid for with stolen money, the money from my car, the car I worked through nursing school to buy. The car that gets me to the job where I save actual lives while you decide which brand of hiking socks best represents your inner spirit." Brandon looked from me to our father, his jaw slack. "Dad, is that true?" Before my father could fabricate a lie, the doorbell rang. A sharp, insistent ringing. Everyone froze. I just smiled. "I think you should get that, Dad. I believe they're here for you." My father, looking utterly defeated, walked to the door like a man walking to the gallows. He opened it, and there, standing on the porch, were 2 uniformed police officers. One of them was a woman whose face I recognized from the station. "Richard Miller?" she asked, her voice calm and professional. "Yes," my father croaked. "We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of grand theft auto and forgery. We also need to speak with you about the fraudulent sale of a vehicle to a minor." One of the officers stepped inside. The whole room was silent, watching the patriarch of the family, the man who prided himself on control and authority, being read his rights in his own living room. My mother started sobbing, a raw, ugly sound. "Chloe, how could you do this to your father? To your family?" I turned to her, the last shred of pity I had for her evaporating. "Me? I didn't do this. He did. He chose to steal from his own daughter. He chose to forge my name. He made his choice, and I made mine. My choice was to finally stand up for myself." I looked around at the shocked faces of my extended family. Welcome to the new family dynamic, the one where I am no longer the bank. The officers handcuffed my father. As they led him out, his eyes met mine. For a second I saw not anger, but pure, unadulterated shock. The shock of a man who had pushed and pushed, always expecting the other person to absorb the blow, and had finally, unexpectedly, been pushed back. It was the most satisfying sight of my entire life. If this story of an epic takedown is giving you a sense of justice, give this video a like. It tells the algorithm that stories of empowerment matter. After the police car pulled away, taking my father with it, an eerie silence fell over the house. The smell of the uneaten roast chicken suddenly seemed nauseating. My extended family, who had been frozen in shock, began to quietly gather their things, avoiding my eyes as if my newfound spine were contagious. They mumbled awkward goodbyes to my weeping mother and scurried out the door, not wanting to be associated with the drama. Brandon's farewell party was officially over before it had even begun. I stood there for a moment, watching the chaotic aftermath. My mother was slumped on the couch, sobbing into her hands. Brandon just stood in the middle of the living room, looking lost, his brand-new backpack now seeming absurdly out of place. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a dawning horror and confusion. "Chloe, what's going to happen?" "What's going to happen?" I said, my voice devoid of the rage that had fueled me just moments before, replaced by a quiet finality. "Is that for the first time, you're all going to experience consequences. Dad is going to need a lawyer, a good one. That costs money. He's going to have to pay back the family of the kid he sold my car to. That costs money. Your trip to Asia, Brandon? It's canceled. The money from my car is evidence in a criminal case. It's gone." My mother looked up, her face streaked with tears and makeup. "You have to help us, Chloe. You have to drop the charges. He's your father." "No," I said, the words simple and solid. I don't. He stopped being my father in any meaningful way when he decided his son's vacation was more important than my property and my trust. You stopped being my mother when you stood by and let him do it. You were both complicit. I picked up my empty folder from the dining table. I've moved out. My paychecks are no longer being deposited into an account you have access to. The family ATM is closed. Permanently. The legal fallout was swift and messy, just as Mark had predicted. Faced with undeniable evidence, the texts, the authentic title, the police report, and a handwriting analysis of the signature that confirmed the forgery, my father had no choice but to take a plea deal. He avoided jail time, but the conviction was real. He was sentenced to 2 years of probation, a hefty fine, and mandatory restitution. He had to pay back the family of the college student in full, and he had to pay me the market value of the car, which, ironically, was significantly more than the good price he'd been so proud of. The conviction also meant he lost his position as a treasurer for the local community league, a role he cherished for the sense of small-town importance it gave him. The public shame was, perhaps, a greater punishment for him than any fine. My car was returned from the police impound lot a few weeks later. The first time I sat behind the wheel again, I just breathed. It smelled faintly of evidence bags and stale air, but it was mine. It was freedom. I drove straight from the lot to my new apartment, parked in my own designated spot, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly, unequivocally home. My relationship with my family, as you can imagine, is non-existent. My mother tried calling a few times, her pleas turning into venomous accusations that I had ruined the family. I blocked her number. Brandon sent a few half-hearted texts asking to borrow money to get by, now that the family's primary income source, me, was gone. I ignored them. He had to get a real job, working nights stocking shelves at a grocery store. It turned out that finding himself didn't require a trip to Thailand after all. It just required an empty wallet. The most profound change, however, was internal. The quiet, simmering resentment I had carried for years was gone, replaced by a peaceful sense of self-possession. I worked my shifts at the hospital with a lighter heart. I started making friends outside of my family's suffocating orbit. I took that weekend trip to the beach that I had once been denied, and I paid for it with my own money. Money no one could lay a claim to. I felt the sun on my face and the sand between my toes, and I realized this was what it felt like to be in charge of your own happiness. I had not just won back my car, I had won back my life. The price had been my family, but I came to realize they had been charging me far too much for their conditional love all along. It's been 6 months since that night. Sometimes I sit here in my quiet apartment, looking out the window at the city lights, and it feels like a lifetime ago. For a long time after my father's arrest, there was a phantom limb feeling, a painful ache where my family used to be. It's a strange thing to grieve people who are still alive, but that's what it was. I was grieving the family I wished I had, the parents I thought I could one day earn the love of. But that feeling has started to fade, replaced by something I haven't felt since I was a little girl: peace. My whole life I was taught that my value was based on my utility to others, specifically to my brother. My achievements were only good if they could be leveraged for his benefit. My income was only good if it could fund his dreams. I was the sturdy, reliable bridge, and it was my job to let everyone else walk all over me to get to where they were going. I thought that if I was just a little more helpful, a little more accommodating, a little more sacrificial, one day they would turn around, see me for me, and say, "Thank you." That text message on my birthday wasn't just cruel. It was a gift. It was the moment I realized they would never turn around. They would just keep walking and expect me to hold their weight forever. It was the moment I realized they weren't just taking my car. They were taking my future, my independence, and my right to build a life of my own. They thought they were taking my last bit of freedom. But what they actually did was show me the door to the cage I never realized I was in. Sometimes, when I'm driving home from a long shift, I'll tap the steering wheel and smile. This car isn't just a car anymore. It's a reminder. It's a 4-wheeled steel and glass monument to the day I chose myself. The biggest lesson I learned is that you can't wait for the people who are hurting you to decide you're worthy of respect. You have to decide it for yourself, and then you have to be willing to enforce it, even when it's the hardest thing in the world. I know there are people watching this who feel trapped in a similar way. People who are the responsible one in a family that takes and never gives. People who are told to be grateful for scraps while others are given the whole feast. If my story can give you one thing, let it be this. Your breaking point doesn't have to be the end. It can be the beginning. It's the moment you get to decide what you are worth, and your worth is not negotiable. If you've ever had to draw a line in the sand for your own well-being, share a piece of your story in the comments. Your strength could be the sign someone else is waiting for. And please, don't forget to subscribe for more stories of truth and triumph. Thank you for listening.